Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you. Good morning. Happy Wednesday morning. Hopefully, my audio is still working. I always have to talk about this at the beginning of the show now because my audio has obviously had issues the past week or so. Hopefully, this shit is working. All right, it seems like it is working. As usual, we had one issue earlier this week or at the end of last week, whenever it was. I don't even know. Who cares? It's all in the past. College basketball starting to turn it around and being selective. 1-0 again last night, 2 days in a row, one play, one win. UNLV plus 11.5. They were, I think, within that number the whole game. They almost pulled off the outright upset, which would have been sweet because whenever I take an underdog like that, I throw a little bit on the money line. When it's a huge underdog like that, I still put like 1 to 3% of it on the money line just so I don't feel that bad if they win outright. I get a little bit extra for it. It does mean you lose a little bit, a small amount of money if they don't get it, but who cares when the main bet wins and you win 97 to 99% of the bet, whatever. So they only lost by 1. So hell yeah, UNLV coming through. Let's talk about today's slate here. We got a pretty big college basketball slate, but I'm going to try to keep this brief because I got to get out of here. Only talk about maybe some of the bigger games here, maybe some of the games that caught my eye briefly, I guess. I mean, we did have Davidson and Temple kind of caught my eye a little bit just because Temple has a worse record, but they are undefeated at home and they are favored in this game. So the odds makers, even though they're telling you Davidson is the better team, I do think KenPom has them as more significantly the better team than what this number is telling you here. So it is interesting. Temple, I would still lean to the Temple side though, just because the number looks kind of crazy. It almost looks like they're begging you to take Davidson here with the 8-2 record versus a 6-4 team. But so odds makers are telling you one thing. KenPom is telling you that Davidson is a little bit better than what the odds makers are telling you. So a little bit of a discrepancy there. I don't want to take it, but that was one of the interesting lines to me. And then I did look briefly at there was this battle of South Carolina, wherever it is here, between South Carolina State and USC Upstate. Where are we at? This is kind of an interesting one because I was looking, South Carolina State, they're coming off playing real tough with Furman on the road here as an in-state little brother. I mean, they're an in-state little brother in both of these games. They're a 12.5-point dog in that one, and they came to within 4 of Furman, and they were winning a lot of that game, wound up blowing it. So that was a big performance out of South Carolina State. So having to play another game on the road here, it's not exactly something I would want to do. I would look to fade South Carolina State. The problem is South Carolina Upstate is a very bad team. They're one of the worst teams in Division I, and I believe they only have one Division I win, and it's against Western Carolina, who's not impressive either. And they're coming off a big step-up game as well against an in-state big brother in South Carolina, although they did lose more badly than that. So I would still lean to South Carolina Upstate, which is taking, I think, a couple of points in this one because that's really how bad they are. It's down from 3.5 to 1.5, so it does look like the number is moving in that direction. So that's the way I would look in that one. Temple has actually dropped, by the way, from 3 to 2.5. So take from all of that what you will. We have a couple of big games today as well. Xavier is at UConn. UConn is moving back up in the rankings here, and Xavier is coming off their big Cincinnati battle where they played Cincinnati real tough and barely lost the game. That seems to always be a low-scoring physical battle, man. With that having been their last game, having to travel again, second straight road game, going to UConn, even though, yeah, you're going to step up when it's UConn. And yeah, I think it's the Big East opener for Xavier as well. So it's not like they're going to overlook UConn. But the question is, are they going to have that much left in the tank after this big physical game against Cincinnati? I don't know. It doesn't look like the greatest spot to me for Xavier. And UConn, because of those losses they had earlier in the season, I think is flying a little bit under the radar right now. However, they did just beat Gonzaga, which is a huge win for them. So I can't play UConn off of that big win either. So this is going to be a stay away for me as well. Very hard to gauge. UConn's up from 11.5 to 13.5. The total is down from 149 to 147. It's not something where I would say, both of these teams are in bad spots. You might see like a lack of defense here. I don't really think that's going to be the case here. And UConn always plays very, very slow paced as well. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to stay away from it completely. I don't know what else to think about this game. Both teams are in bad spots in that one. Number 21, Memphis, and UConn is number 11 now, by the way, as they move back up into the rankings with some of those big wins, including the Gonzaga one. Number 21, Memphis, pretty good team this year. They're at Virginia. They are coming off a nice ranked win over Clemson and now playing a second straight road game. So it doesn't look like exactly the greatest spot for Memphis to me. In Virginia, even though they've been struggling, they're 5-0 at home at the very least. Some of their losses, I mean, these are not horrible losses. I mean, they lost to Tennessee, who's one of the best teams in the country. St. John's is good, although they got absolutely blown out, which is kind of a bad sign. Florida, also a very good team. They're able to get that win last night against North Carolina after almost blowing a big lead in that one. And then SMU's not that bad either. Virginia, I mean, they're coming off a win that I think is just going to kind of get them some new momentum here against Bethune-Cookman. So they basically got a cupcake where it's basically just a tune-up game where you get to end your loss streak and bring momentum into the next game. So I do lean to the Virginia side in this one. And Virginia does at least slow the pace down and play defense. So that's what you're getting. And you're getting 5 points at home. But it looks like it's up from 4.5 to 5 through the 5 with juice. So not going to play that one. And what else we got before I get to my actual play? My actual play is in one of the big games today as well, by the way. I figured I would just hit some of the bigger games. San Francisco and Bradley, I think, is going to be a big game, a good game at the very least, with San Fran coming off that win for me where they beat Loyola Chicago and knocked Loyola Chicago from the ranks of the unbeaten, I think, if I remember correctly. And then you got Bradley on the other side is also a good team, undefeated at home, and they're coming off a loss to Santa Clara, which no shame in that. I mean, Santa Clara is a good team. Bradley is actually the favorite in this game. So odds makers trying to tell you something. They're actually telling you San Francisco is still the better team, but Bradley down from 2.5 to 1.5, it looks like. But San Francisco has not played a true road game yet this year. Bradley is undefeated at home, so I would look to the Bradley side in this one, even though the odds makers are telling you San Francisco is the somewhat better team here. Bradley's actually flipped from a 2-point dog to a 1.5-point favorite, so that is the way that I would look in that one. And then, I mean, Butler-Marquette is a big game, I guess, just because it is a Big East game here. Marquette ranked, obviously. They are the way better team than Butler. Butler, not that great, but Butler coming off a game where they played pretty competitively against Wisconsin. It's not like they're going to overlook Marquette. It's just a matter of, like, are they going to have enough in the tank to play this game? Are they good enough to play this game? Marquette is going to want to speed them up as well, so it may not be the greatest situation for Butler to be in here. Marquette, they're coming off that loss to Dayton, so it does look like a bounce-back spot to me for Marquette after taking that loss, and they were coming off a win over Wisconsin, so the public is still probably going to come in on the ranked Marquette team here if they play this game and say, well, Marquette beat Wisconsin and Wisconsin beat Butler, so obviously Butler's going to lose this game. That's probably what the public is going to say, but I don't necessarily disagree with the Marquette side in this one. Again, that was a tough game against Dayton. I played Dayton in that game. I do think this looks like it is going to be a bounce-back spot, and it is the first Big East game for both teams, so it's the Big East home opener for Marquette, so you're not going to find me trying to fade Marquette in this one. Sitting at 13.5, and it does look like it's dropped a little bit to reduce juice, but whatever. And then Washington State and Washington, the Battle of Washington is happening. This is a game where I don't know how to read this game at all, really. Washington State's got a pretty good record so far. Their losses are to Iowa and SMU, no shame in that. They did get a couple of nice road wins. I think these are road games against Nevada and Boise State. I mean, those are not easy games to win. Going out on the road again to Washington. Washington's actually a 3.5-point favorite in this one. So odds makers telling you these teams are about even though Washington does have the slightly worse record. Washington did lose to Nevada, so the public might look at that and think, well, Washington State beat Nevada, who then beat Washington. So Washington State getting points here looks like the obvious move, right? So I would tend to think maybe otherwise in this one, because that may be where the public may perceive value in taking the points with Washington State here. So I'm going to tend to kind of lean in the opposite direction. Washington, they lost to UCLA on the road. I mean, no shame in that. And losing to USC coming off that game, I think they were probably just hung over after that. I mean, USC is not a great team, but the lean would be to Washington in this one very slightly, but not a play for me. Washington's up from 2.5 to 3. My one play in college basketball is Michigan minus 2.5. This is one of those lines where this is a neutral site game. So we're looking at this game and you got two ranked teams, but Oklahoma is ranked 14th in the country, and they're undefeated right now. Michigan's a 2-loss team sitting at number 24. This game is in Charlotte, North Carolina, so not really a geographic advantage one way or the other here, I don't think. But the odds makers are telling you that Michigan is actually the better team despite being ranked 10 ranking spots worse and having the worst record. So this is the type of game that catches my eye, man, where I'm like, well, the public is going to look at this and think, wait a minute, I'm getting points with Oklahoma as the undefeated team. They're an underdog and they're the higher ranked team. Like, give me that. That looks like value, right? I'm going to go in the other direction with this, man. So this is a clash of styles, although Ken Baum is going to tell you that Michigan likes to speed up the game a little bit this year, and Oklahoma likes to play a bit slower. And I do tend to say the team that likes to slow the pace does actually have the easier time of it in like a neutral site game. It's easier to slow it down than it is to speed it up. However, since I think Michigan is the better team, I think they might be able to control the pace here. Ken Baum has both of these teams almost evenly ranked on offense, but he has Michigan as the way better defense of the two. He has Michigan as the less lucky of the two teams significantly this year, which means Michigan has underperformed so far based on what's expected out of how they played so far. And like, it means that Michigan has probably lost some games they shouldn't have lost, essentially, whereas Oklahoma maybe has won some games that maybe they wouldn't have been expected to win based on how they perform. So he does have Oklahoma as the significantly luckier team, and he does have Oklahoma as having faced the weaker schedule as well. And you can look at this right here, man. I mean, they beat Providence. Providence is not that good this year. They beat Arizona. I mean, that was their biggest win. Arizona has not really done that well. They've fallen from the rankings. Arizona looks like they may not be as good this year. We don't know, but they have kind of fallen off. Louisville is not really that good either, and kind of dealing with some injuries there. Georgia Tech, not really that good either. And Oklahoma State, I don't think they're that good either, but that is still a huge rivalry game for Oklahoma, man. So Oklahoma, I don't think they've faced as difficult a schedule as Michigan has, but also I don't know. I'm not going to necessarily say they're going to overlook Michigan in a spotlight game like this on ESPN2, but this Oklahoma State game always matters, man, to both teams. It's a big rivalry game, and they beat them by 15 points. So I think they might be coming into this game feeling a little bit plump and gay, to say the least here. And Oklahoma's sitting at 10-0 on the season. They might be feeling pretty good about themselves here. Now they go to Michigan, and that game I think was also a neutral site game. Michigan's coming off a loss to John Calipari's Arkansas team. So I think Michigan may be in more of a bounce back spot here. And you look at the games that they played leading up to that. They beat ranked Xavier, ranked Wisconsin, and then they beat Iowa, who also is pretty good, by 2. I mean, Michigan was actually a big favorite in this one, even though I do think Iowa's not that bad a team. Michigan was still able to get out of that one with a win, and then they did falter against Arkansas. But again, now I think this is a bounce back spot for Michigan in this one, in my opinion. Michigan has more time off, as Oklahoma did just face Oklahoma State 4 days ago. I think Michigan played this game 8 days ago. So I think when they had their win streak disrupted like this, I think it's going to help that they have that time off, because they're going to use that time off to try to fix some things, in my opinion, and they don't have bigger games up next. So I think they're going to show up focused in this game, although I don't think Oklahoma has big games up next either. But I like how this sets up for Michigan better than I like how it sets up for Oklahoma. I like the market read in this one as well. So that's going to be the play. Give me Michigan minus the points in this one. You see Michigan sitting at about 3 with reduced juice here. There are 2.5s out there, it appears. So again, give me Michigan. And like I said, I think Michigan does have the more difficult schedule here as well, facing that run of teams that I just mentioned. Virginia Tech's not really that bad either. TCU also not really that bad. And they lost to Wake Forest, which Wake, I don't think is really that bad either. I mean, so Michigan at the very least has played more bigger conference teams as well. So yeah, give me Michigan in that one. And now move over to NHL here. We do have a somewhat small NHL slate here. A few big games. Toronto is at Dallas. That's a pretty interesting game. A couple of good matchups here, actually, in the NHL. NBA is off today, by the way, after congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks, I guess, for winning the NBA Cup yesterday, pulling off the upset as the underdog there in Las Vegas, which nobody really cares who wins the NBA Cup, but congratulations anyway to the Bucks for getting that done. Toronto and Dallas. Dallas is down from minus 135 to minus 131. I don't see the percentages on this yet. I don't necessarily disagree with the Dallas side in this one, because Toronto is starting a road trip here. They just beat Buffalo, and now they're starting the road trip with a couple days off. So it looks like Toronto's going to have one of their better goaltenders back in net, probably Wall and Stolarz. They actually both haven't been that bad. So after Hill to be played in the last game, they're going to have one of their better goaltenders in. They're starting a 2-game road trip here. And I tried to check with two teams have 2-game road trips here, and I tried to check to see if it's the dad trip, as I always try to do when it's the 2-game road trip, but it's really hard to find information about the dad trip now, man. So it's difficult to figure that out. So I haven't been able to figure that out. But what we could say is that Toronto's starting a road trip, 2 games, and the next game in it is against Buffalo, who they just beat. So, like, which one of these teams do you think they're going to be more focused on, Dallas or the much worse Buffalo, who they already just beat last game? Yeah, I think they're going to bring their focus in this game against Dallas, man. So that is my opinion here. I lean to the Toronto side here. Dallas is also coming off a nice win over Washington. They're not going to overlook Toronto because Toronto's playing really well as well, but nice win 2 days ago against Washington, man. And they're just kind of sitting at home, kind of basking in it and maybe listening to the local media and whatever about how good they are. So I don't like how that sets up for Dallas as much as how it sets up for Toronto. So I would maybe, if I wanted to play this game, I would consider taking a shot with Toronto at a nice underdog price there. Florida is coming off a win against Edmonton 2 days ago, and they're finishing a road trip here. So this doesn't exactly look like the greatest spot to me for Florida, even though I know they're 2-2 on the road trips. They probably want to try to get the rubber match here and have a winning road trip rather than a losing road trip. They're not going to be unfocused against Minnesota, but when you're playing Edmonton and Minnesota twice in 3 days, that's not that easy to do, both on the road. And they had this barn burner of a game against Edmonton where they held off. Edmonton was looking for Stanley Cup Finals revenge there. Florida was able to hold them off and prevent that revenge. Big win for Florida there. This, again, is going to be another big game for them, but I think that the situation might set up a little bit better for Minnesota in this one. Minnesota's coming off a loss to Vegas with an extra day off here, so, and they're not traveling, so the situational spot, I mean, the scheduling, they have extra rest over what Florida has, and they're not traveling, so those look like slight advantages to Minnesota. And people are going to look at this and say, wait a minute, Florida beat Edmonton, and Edmonton walloped Minnesota a few games back, so it looks easy, right? Take Florida here, even though Florida is laying a price on the road. But again, it doesn't work that way. This transitive handicapping is not the way to go. Every game is an individual situation. I know Minnesota's off a big game against Vegas, too, where they only lost by 1. But it looks to me like Minnesota's probably going to have one of their better goalies in net for them here. Wallstead played that game. It's going to either be Gustafsson or Fleury coming into this game, so they will have at least a better goalie coming in, even though I'm not a fan of Fleury. I don't think he's that good. So preferably, if you like Minnesota, it would be Gustafsson. I don't know if he's hurt or anything like that. I don't know why they had another goalie fill in that previous game, but whatever the case is, Florida's up from minus 130 to minus 133. But if I was going to play this game, I would lean to Minnesota. I think the Toronto lean is stronger than that one. And then I do also lean to Utah in this game against Vancouver. Not as big a game as those other two, but maybe not a bad game. Vancouver, this looks a little bit like a sandwich spot to me. I don't quite want to come in and play this because Vancouver is starting a road trip, even though it is only a 2-game road trip. You do tend to be focused to start the road trip, but it is a back-to-back, and they are playing Vegas tomorrow. So if they're going to pay attention to one of these 2 games, the Vegas game is going to get more of their attention. And they are coming off a game over Colorado where they won against Colorado. That's a big win as well. So Utah is the lesser of these 3 teams here. So it is somewhat of a sandwich spot there. So I would lean to Utah on that one. But like I said, when Vancouver is starting a road trip here, and again, I couldn't figure out if this was the dad trip or not. I'm guessing it's probably not, but it seems like it's much more difficult to find sources that tell you when the dad trips are coming up now. Like, I haven't been able to find any this year so far, and I think a couple have already happened. They're always a 2-game road trip, though, seemingly, and I don't think this was Utah's either. Utah also beat Colorado, and they were coming off a shootout loss to Minnesota, so they played a couple of big games in a row, didn't even suffer a letdown, and they still went into San Jose and beat them. Now they're coming home. They have multiple days off, but it is still a return home spot for Utah, returning back up into elevation. So, again, I don't know if it's the greatest spot, and they do have a quick revenge spot against Minnesota up next, although I'm not saying they're going to overlook Vancouver here, but it is a spot where it's questionable enough that I don't quite want to come in and play Utah here, although that still is the way that I lean in this one. I think Vancouver is still in the sandwich spot. Utah has a little bit of extra time off at the very least, and it looks like it is going to be Vejmelka in net again here for them. I think it's already confirmed, actually, just because they have a decent amount of rest coming into this game. So he played the last few games, but he still will play in this one. Demko, as Nate had pointed out, is back for Vancouver. He hasn't been that great, though, really, since he's come back. They're 1-2 in his games, and he's given up a fair amount of goals, but he did play well in the Colorado game. So maybe it took him a little while to kind of get back in rhythm, and maybe we're seeing him get back into form here. That may be the case here. It looks like he may play in this game and play a third straight game. So you may get a little bit of a tired Demko, though, if he does play. And if he doesn't, then Vancouver's playing some probably somewhat inferior goalie in this one. So that is another reason to maybe look to Utah. Let's go to the bowl games, college football bowl games. And I actually have a play in the first one up, which is the Boca Raton Bowl. I look for, man, this doesn't seem to have a sponsor either. It's just the Boca Raton Bowl now. Now, I tend to look for motivational disparities here, man, and I think this is one here. James Madison, they were slated to be about a 3-point favorite. It was up to 9.5. Now it's down to 7. So there are a few things that may be conflicting indicators on this, but I think the main motivational handicap here, from a motivational standpoint, is on the James Madison side. It looks like it's mostly 7.5 right now. It did go up from 6.5 to 7.5 with juice. I do see 76% of tickets on JMU and 61% of the cash over on the other side in Western Kentucky. But the percentages, the market percentages in bowls like this, I don't think there's as much stock that you can put into them because the lines move all over the place. So I don't really know that there's as much stock. I know I'm not playing the best number here. There were some 7s out there. It looks like you can still find 7s at minus 115. So I don't mind playing it at -7, minus 115 either. I think this is a problem, man, for Western Kentucky. If you look at who's playing in these bowls and who isn't, Western Kentucky, they have 20 people opting out in this game. A bunch of Western Kentucky starters are not playing in this game. So that tells you this team does not really care about this bowl. And that includes their best player, Veltkamp, their quarterback. And Western Kentucky doesn't really have much of a rushing attack. So they were mostly a passing attack. They were kind of a one-dimensional offense. They finished the season. They played decently against Jacksonville State to get into the conference final, also against Jacksonville State. And then they got into that game and they got their asses kicked. So Western Kentucky, yeah, I mean, they were in the Sun Belt final. They got there. They didn't play well at all in that game. And it looked like maybe they were just starting to not care as much. Western Kentucky, I mean, this program has been in similar bowls to this multiple years, the past few years. I think they were in one last year too. So this program, I don't think this bowl game matters that much to them. And you can tell it must not matter that much if a bunch of their players are just saying, screw this, and we're not going to play in this bowl game. So that's why the line is moved. And on the one hand, that does mean that young guys are going to get their chance. So you are going to see motivated players on the Western Kentucky side. So that's what happens when a bunch of people opt out. You get this kind of conflicting thing where the line is going to move. You have to try to gauge, did that line move too much? And in this case, I don't actually think it did. A lot of times it doesn't, because the thing is, even though you're going to get these players that don't usually get their chance to play, so they're going to be motivated, but motivation can only take you so far. And when it's players who are at a lesser skill level and they have way less experience, you don't really expect them to do anywhere near as well. So that kind of negates the motivational standpoint there. So even if Western Kentucky's younger guys are going to show up, that kind of negates it. And also, how are they going to feel about their players not caring about this game? What kind of message does that send to the other players? I mean, maybe it'll pump them up and be like, well, these guys don't care, but we're going to care. But still, I just don't like it. I don't like what's going on for Western Kentucky here with their leader, their quarterback not playing. Not only is he not playing in this game, he is visiting Florida Atlantic University, FAU, which is in Boca Raton. So the team's taking the trip to play this bowl game, and their quarterback is not only not playing in this game, he is trying to look at his next year's college. He's looking at the college that he's leaving Western Kentucky to go to. He's going to FAU on this trip. It is so ridiculous. I think that this shouldn't happen, man. Honestly, I think we have to do something. I mentioned this yesterday about the opt-outs, the transfer portal. I think that you should have to wait until the bowl season is over because it is just ridiculous. I think even more for coaches and players, really. But again, what message is it sending? Really, you're going to go and you're going to give another college your pitch while your team that you played for all year and you were like their star player, you're leaving them high and dry in their bowl game, and you're going to look at FAU here. And FAU is not even as good a team either. Western Kentucky has been the way better of those two programs. None of this makes any sense to me, man. It's ridiculous. That's a Velt camp there for Western Kentucky, who I'm talking about there, their quarterback. It's crazy, man. And with Western Kentucky, with him gone, they relied very heavily on their passing attack. They're a one-dimensional offense. And now with him not there, they're basically going to be a zero-dimensional offense in this game. And James Madison, they basically have their full squad showing up here, aside from like a couple of injuries and maybe a couple of opt-outs. But James Madison, they played another good season. They had a good season last year in their first, I think it was their first or second season up in FBS. So they actually weren't even allowed to play in a bowl last year, but they petitioned because there were some bowl spots available. Both them and Jacksonville State were allowed into bowls because there were extra spots available and they had enough wins. Jacksonville State won under Rich Rod, and they got their first bowl win in program history. But you know who didn't? James Madison. They lost their bowl game to Air Force. So this James Madison team, they're still looking for the first bowl win in program history. I think that's a big deal, man. That's a motivating factor. When your program has never won a bowl game, you've only been in one bowl. It was against Air Force last year, and Air Force was good last year, and that was a triple option attack. James Madison was not used to facing a triple option. Yeah, well, you know who doesn't run a triple option? Western Kentucky. So James Madison does not have to worry about that. And Western Kentucky, with all these opt-outs and their quarterback not being here, they basically have a zero option attack almost here. So James Madison, I mean, this should be a much easier game for them to get their first bowl win. I think they're going to be motivated for that reason. James Madison, they're coming off an ugly loss in their, I think it was, they were trying to get into the Sun Belt final, I think, and they lost their last regular season game to Marshall, again, they were just, despite getting outgained in every single game, I pointed that out, Marshall kept winning. It's just ridiculous. I don't know how that kept happening. James Madison, so they might come into this game a little bit more angry, man. A lot of times when you have a bowl team that lost their regular season game, they're kind of in a bounce back mode here. They're a bit angry, and they want to win this game, man. Whereas Western Kentucky, I know they had a real ugly game, but like all their players left, so that tells you they don't really care about this. James Madison, for all those reasons, he does care a little bit more. Now, the one caveat here is that James Madison's quarterback all season, Barrett, is injured. So he's not playing in this game, but he didn't opt out. He's injured. So I think he's going to be there on the sidelines. So that still will be a motivating factor here. So JMU, their quarterback's not in there. Their backup will be in there, but I think their backup at least has experience playing in this offense, and he'll have Barrett there helping him out on the sidelines. So I don't think that's that bad of a situation. And James Madison, I mean, they have a lot of balance. They're good on both sides of the ball, defense and offense, but their offense was a bit more of a rushing offense than throwing offense. So I don't think that their quarterback being out matters anywhere near as much as Western Kentucky's quarterback being out. Western Kentucky's quarterback is saying screw you to the team, and their offense was all passing. Whereas James Madison, their quarterback is just injured. He should be there, I think, on the sidelines, and they're more of a rushing attack. So James Madison, I mean, they're still like basically intact as far as that's concerned, as far as the motivation is concerned. So for all those reasons, man, give me James Madison. And then as far as the total, it's down from 52.5 to 51. 51 is a key total number in football. 58% of the tickets are on the over, but 81% of the cash on the under. And I know you might argue, well, some of this move was because Velt camp is out for Western Kentucky. Yeah, that's true, but Western Kentucky has so many guys gone in this game, man, that I think this total is probably still too high. So I think it's going to be difficult for Western Kentucky to find points in this game. So that would I would also lean to the under in this one, even though I know the under tends to be in conflict with a favorite covering a bigger number here. But I just think James Madison is the only one of these two teams that has reason to show up here. And then the LA Bowl, which is no longer the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl, thankfully. We don't have to deal with that guy anymore. I hope he's not there. I mean, leftist Hollywood propagandist Jimmy Kimmel, get rid of him. This is now the Art of Sport LA Bowl. And I know this game was also hosted by Gronk the last couple of years as well. So I don't know if Gronk is going to be there either. So maybe this is going to be less of a stupid like gimmick bowl here. I mean, all the bowls are kind of gimmicky in a way, but maybe this one will be less gimmicky. And at least with Kimmel out of there, instantly improves the quality of the game at the very least. So this is a game I was thinking about playing. So I'll run it down for you real quick before I get out of here. This is Cal at UNLV. So, I mean, as far as the geography is concerned, both of these teams are probably going to, both of these teams are close by, right? Like, it's not a big travel spot. Coming from Berkeley down to LA or Las Vegas to LA is even closer. So both of these teams should have some fans showing up in this game. But, I mean, you got to look at the ticketing, man. Like I said, like, I've not looked at what the ticket sales are. You can usually find that information in most of these bowls. That is an indicating factor. And I know I haven't used it in many of these games yet. As far as the game I just talked about, I don't think there's that much of a geographical advantage. And I would imagine that James Madison's crowd is more excited about that because they haven't won a bowl game yet. They've only been in one bowl in program history. Western Kentucky is always in bowls, so I don't think the Western Kentucky fans are going to care as much about that game as James Madison's doing. James Madison, they're more of a football program, to be honest. They were really good in the FCS for a while, but you got to look at the ticket sales. You can sometimes find that information, figure out if a team is going to have like a much bigger like amount of the fans in the stadium, because that's going to help a little bit. Obviously, it's more of an advantage if more of your fans are coming in. This game, my initial read on this was I wanted to potentially play Cal in this game, but this line has been a roller coaster, man. It started out, UNLV was actually, I think, favored at one point around 1. And then it was announced that UNLV's coach ditched the team. And then I think some of their players maybe opted out as well. You have to go look at the opt-out track. I don't think it's that many players, though. But mostly it's their coach. So UNLV had a great season. They got into the Mountain West final. And if they'd won that game, they'd be in the playoff instead of Boise State. So they're one game away from being in the playoff. And now they fall into the LA Bowl. So again, I think this is a disappointed UNLV team. And then on top of that, their coach leaves. So I do still lean to taking the points with Cal in this one. All that being said, like, I just think UNLV, like, where's their motivation going to come from? You look for disappointed teams in bowl games. This one, I think, maybe won. I mean, they were just that close to being in the playoff, and that is a steep drop-off down to playing in the LA Bowl. And they're a ranked team that had a good season, too, ranked 24th in the country. So the public's only going to come in on the UNLV side to the tune of 60% of the tickets, but they do have 81% of the cash. So that's weird to me that it looks like the cash is coming in on their side. I don't really know if that's really that accurate. And UNLV, at the very least, their players like Hajj Malik Williams and these guys, they're all still going to be there in this bowl game. So they do have mostly an intact roster. So there is at least that you can say for UNLV. So maybe they won't be completely unmotivated here, but I mean, that it is still a disappointed spot for them. Like, I don't think they really want to be in this bowl when they could have been in the playoffs if one result had gone differently. So that's how that game is going. But this line has gone all over the place, man, because UNLV's coach left and whatever. It was like a 1-point line for a little while. Then Cal's quarterback, Mendoza, decided he's not going to play in this game. So the biggest player opt-out here is California's quarterback. For some reason, he's not playing in this game, and I don't know how much of a drop-off that's going to be. So Cal, after UNLV's coach had left, the line swung to Cal -5, and then it swung all the way back to like UNLV -1 after Mendoza announced that he was going to be out. And now it's actually moved a little bit further to UNLV -3, which I think is going a little bit too far again with a disappointed UNLV team here, even though they are the better team. I think Cal faced a more difficult schedule at the very least. They were in the ACC. They were having to cross country all over the place, crisscross. They won at Auburn. I mean, that's not bad. They should have won that game against Miami. They got screwed over by BS. They could have won against Pitt. I mean, they had a lot of close losses here, and then they did get blown out by SMU, which, I mean, SMU is a playoff team, so that's not really that bad of a loss either. Cal, I mean, they got enough wins to get into a bowl here, so that's, at the very least, you could say that about Cal. But again, Cal did face a more difficult schedule than UNLV did, being in the ACC and having to cross the country a whole bunch of times. They did not have it easy, whereas UNLV had a much easier schedule, so the record's maybe a little bit misleading in this one, where UNLV has the way better record. Again, it's one of those situations where there's a team with a way better record, but they're in the significantly worse conference. So you have that going on here. So that would make me lean to taking the points with Cal a little bit as well. Total down from 51.5 to 47. So you missed out on that key number if you're looking at the total here. But I think a lot of the reason the total dropped is because Mendoza is not going to play for Cal anymore. 56% of the tickets, 67% of the cash on the over. So in this one, it is possible that the line has dropped too much, because if you have a UNLV team that has all their players, so they're not going to be as focused, it tends to affect the defense a little bit more. Cal can certainly score, and UNLV certainly can put up points themselves as well. So I think this line may have dropped too much on the total. So I would not want to try to play an under in this one. I would actually lean to over the smaller number here, as it's sitting on another one of those key numbers of 47. Lean to taking Cal plus the points as well. I mean, at the very least, I think Mendoza's replacement is a guy who probably knows the system, and their coach is still there. Most of their guys are still there. So I do think Cal still wants to show up in this game, even though Mendoza kind of shocked everybody by deciding he wasn't going to play in this game. So I think with James Madison's quarterback being out, it's a lot less of a factor because he's injured, so you really can't blame him for that. With Cal, with these guys like actually just dropping out, like Mendoza and Veltkamp, I mean, that is a little bit more of like an FU to the team, really, almost. So I don't know how the team is going to respond to that. So that's going to do it, man. Those are my plays today. Michigan -2.5 in college basketball in that game in Charlotte. And then in the Boca Raton Bowl, my first bowl play of the season is James Madison -7 to get that first win in first bowl win in program history, man. Tower Game Toad on Twitter. Follow the Tower Game Podcast. We're on live at 9:11 p.m. Eastern tonight, baby. The most offensive podcast you'll ever find. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. And you'll be able to watch the live pre-show and post-show tonight and submit to the mailbag, even though it's probably too late to get those read on the show. And you can blame Mark Vestibule for that. That's going to do it, man. Let's have a good one now. Let's get some wins. Being selective again here, man. And NBA will return with a lot of games tomorrow, man. We got bowls going on. We got NBA. It's going to be crazy tomorrow, and more college basketball probably. So, and maybe a little bit of hockey, but probably a light hockey slate tomorrow. I don't even know though. Maybe it's not. It might be a big card for hockey as well. So I got to get going looking at that. All right. Peace out, guys.